Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating puzzle, one that comes from the work of philosopher Kim Chang-ho. And honestly, it might just change the way you think about our most important stories.
So right off the bat, we hit this huge paradox. In the Bible, 1 Timothy flat out tells us to reject profane and old wives' myths. Okay, fair enough, but think about it. The Bible is, overwhelmingly a book of stories. You've got creation, Eden, Noah, Abraham. It's all narrative from start to finish. So what's the deal? Is that a massive contradiction?
To get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with the word myth itself. See, in our modern world, we hear myth and we immediately think lie or falsehood. But its original meaning is so much deeper and way more important for this conversation.
The word in Greek is mythos, and it comes from a verb that just means to speak. At its core, mythos simply means story or narrative. This was the original ancient way that people passed down wisdom, their culture, their entire sense of meaning. It's not about being untrue, it's about conveying a truth that's just too big, too profound for a simple list of facts.
Okay, so that's mythos. Now for our second key term, logos. And this is where things get really interesting, because this one word has two totally different meanings, and that distinction is absolutely crucial.
On one hand, you've got the logos from Greek philosophy. This is logic, reason, rational arguments, the world of proofs and clear-cut thinking. But then there's the logos from the Gospel of John, and that is a whole different ballgame. It's described as life, as light, even as God itself. It's not just an idea, it's a deep, divine, fundamental truth. And that second meaning, that's the one we need to lock onto.
So, we have mythos as story and logos as divine truth. Now, our first instinct is to see these as opposites, right? Story versus fact, fiction versus reality. But the idea we're exploring today flips that completely on its head.
And this brings us to this incredibly powerful metaphor. I want you to picture mythos, the story, not as some kind of fantasy that hides the truth, but as a container that protects it. It's like a sealed spring or a covered well with something precious held safely inside. And there it is. That's the core idea. The story, the mythos, isn't in conflict with the divine truth. It's the very source you have to go to find it. The mythos is the well, and the logos is the life-giving water you draw from it.
So this gives us a kind of roadmap for how to read. It's not a passive thing. It's an active process. First, you have to actually encounter the story, the mythos, in all its detail. Then comes the work. Your job is to interpret it, to unseal its meaning. And only then can you actually draw out the logos, that profound truth that was waiting inside all along.
Okay, that's the theory, but let's make it real. How does this actually work in practice? Let's take it for a spin with one of the most famous stories of all time, the Garden of Eden.
I mean, if you try to read the Eden story like a literal scientific report, you're going to run into trouble pretty fast, right? You've got a talking serpent, you've got a tree of life and a tree of knowledge. You have God just, walking around in the garden in the cool of the day. These are classic elements of mythos.
This brings us to the two completely different ways you can read this. If you read for literal, historical fact, you get stuck on the surface. You get hung up on the talking snake and the magical fruit. You get stuck in the story. And when that happens, the real meaning, the logos, it stays buried. But if you read for meaning, you learn to look through the story, to use it like a lens to see a deeper truth, a truth about humanity, temptation, consciousness, and that's when the logos is revealed.
And boom, that brings us right back to the puzzle we started with. A story becomes a profane and empty myth not because it's a story, but because we failed to do the work. We failed to find the logos inside it. So that warning in the Bible, it's not a warning against stories, it's a warning against reading them poorly.
So, let's bring all these pieces together for a final, really powerful conclusion about what stories are actually for.
The argument here is that the biggest truths, the logos of life, of light, of what it means to be human, they're just too vast, too messy, too complex to be crammed into a simple logical formula. Reason is an amazing tool, but it has its limits.
To be shared, to be understood, this profound logos needs a vessel. It needs a container that can hold all the nuance, the paradox, the emotion. And that vessel is mythos. Story is the technology humanity invented to carry our deepest wisdom across generations.
And this leads us to the ultimate kind of mind-bending conclusion of this whole idea. They're not just connected. They aren't just related. In a very real sense, the mythos is the logos. The story is the living embodiment of the truth. The truth is revealed through the shape of the story. They're two sides of the exact same coin.
And when we learn how to read this way, when we start to look for the logos within the mythos, something incredible happens. An ancient tale stops being just some old, dusty story. It becomes a great light, a source of profound wisdom and insight into our lives, right here and right now.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. This isn't just about ancient texts. Our own lives are stories, right? Narratives we tell ourselves every single day. The question then is this. If you look at your own experiences, not just as a list of facts, but as a mythos, as a story, what deep, guiding truth, what logos, is just waiting there for you to find it?
창세기 1장과 2장은 서로 다른 두 이야기. 문체와 서술이 달라 독립적이야. 물리적 세계기로 보다 깊은 의미가 인간 본질과 영적 성장의 비밀이야. 첫째 날부터 일곱째 날까지 흐르네. 우주 역사가 아닌 영성의 여정이네. 잠든 인간성을 찾아가는 길을 단계별로 그려내는 진화의 그림이야. 형식은 다르지만 주제는 하나야. 평행하게 흐르는 영적 이야기야. 성서는 역사서가 아니야지 해보고야. 메타포 속에 숨은 진실을 찾아가. 인간이란 무엇인가 묻는 질문에 영적 깨달음으로 답을 전해가. 창조기사와의 때는 다른 정성이야. 문학적 차이로 독립적이야. 단순한 기록이 아니는 여러 더 영적 성장의 비밀을 깨달아가. 형식은 다르지만 주제는 하나야. 평행하게 흐르는 영적 이야기야. 성서는 역사서가 아니야지 해보고야. 메타포 속에 숨은 진실을 찾아가. 인간이란 무엇인가 묻는 질문에 영적 깨달음으로 답을 전해가.